Good evening, everyone. For the new year, I need the glasses all the time. On behalf of the chapter of the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art, I want to say Happy New Year and Happy Classical New Year. How's that? We have a particularly exciting start to this year, in that I'll tell you a little bit of a story. And last December, our board member, Eric Friedman of Ryan Associates, came to the board and said, I'm going to put down a challenge, and that is that Ryan Associates will match 25 new memberships. So that was a great challenge to the board, and everyone reached out, and I'm very proud to first say thank you to Eric and Ryan Associates, but to let you all know that we not only kept Eric to his commitment, but we actually brought in 56 new members. So, and I want to say a special thank you to welcome the new members who are here tonight. It's really wonderful that you've joined and committed to the organization, and there will be lots of exciting programs. Particularly this year ahead, we have a great developing program of courses and lectures and tours. And last year, as you all know, was the year of Bernard Maybeck, and we celebrated his 150th year. And this year, we're celebrating the legacy of William Randolph Hearst. It's actually the 125th celebration of the Hearst Corporation, and when we just did a little Googling, we found out, well, he was 25 years old when he founded the Hearst Corporation. So why not celebrate him at 150? And everything that WR brought to California, which of course is tremendous. Our lecture series will be devoted and focused on his architectural contributions, his vast collections, his vision to build, and his fascinating life. From San Simeon to the Hearst Ranch to Berkeley, the buildings there, and to the fantasy of Wintoon, the Hearst compound in Northern California. Castles, movie stars, scandals, oh my. So we hope to make it wonderfully intriguing and educational, and really a tribute to a man who really did contribute a lot to California architecture and history. We might even have a movie night with Citizen Kane, so stay tuned. But tonight, we are in for a special evening with our own Andrew Skurman. I've known Andy for almost 20 years and have had the immense joy and pleasure of working side by side with him, designing and remodeling and building beautiful, beautiful homes. He's a true passionate about his work and his approach to classical architecture. He's not a slave to it, but rather he's a visionary. He can see spaces and structure and forms in a way that the most complex of layouts come together in perfect harmony. I've seen it happen over and over. His houses are breathtakingly beautiful in any vernacular: Georgian, Italian, Spanish, Louis, Hui, and Fui, all the Frenchies, to the Americas, from the grandest to the smallest jewel boxes. And there are some small jewel boxes. His biography is lengthy, with accomplishments and awards, and I'm not going to read that to you tonight. Because if you want to know all that, you need to pick up his book, which I understand has sold out this evening. So go to Amazon or call George. Call George at Builders Booksource, and he'll send you one. It's an exquisite book. Contemporary Classical is a wonderful addition to anyone's library, whether you are a practicing architect or a designer or just a passionata of beautiful, beautiful buildings and interiors and to learn. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. I'll tell you a little bit of the journey that Andy has taken to where his office is on Sacramento Street today. And he came via some of the most prestigious firms in the country: I.M. Pei, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, Gensler and Associates. And he landed then on Sacramento Street 21 years ago when he founded his firm, Andrew Skurman Architects. And now his journey is taking him far afield, to India, to China, Paris, and beyond. He received his prestigious award, the Chevalier of Arts and Letters, from the Minister of Culture of France. And he's also our newly elected chapter president and will serve for the next 2 years. He's also been recently invited to be a visiting artist in residence at the American Academy in Rome. But beyond all that, I will tell you that I've never seen anyone draw the most perfect circles in freehand, ever. It's really rather sexy, okay? Just these perfect circles. Now you know my secret, Andy. It's a sexy thing for a designer, you know? What can I tell you? But beyond his passion for architecture and arts, and his passion for his lovely wife, Françoise, who is in Paris, isn't here this evening, I'll tell you, he also has an obsession for wristwatches. And he always has the best looking wristwatches. So if you can't talk about architecture, you can always ask him, what watch is he wearing? He's a treasured colleague. He's my favorite sparring partner. And we do that, and it's great. And I'm very proud to call him my dear friend. And he's a local treasure. So Andy, come dazzle us.
Good evening. Well, I hope I can live up to that wonderful introduction. Thank you so much, Suzanne, and thank you all for being here. I'm honored to be here tonight. Tonight, I'd like to speak about the language of classicism, and I have a few notes here just on the first few slides, and I'll read it out loud. What is classical? What does classical mean as opposed to modernism or any other kind of style? And I believe it's something that's so harmonious to the eye that it became codified by constant usage over time. There are different languages and different expressions of classicism. For instance, there's the French dialect or language, the English language, the Italian language, Spanish language. And within that language, there are regional dialects. So for instance, in France, there could be a Provence dialect or a Normandy dialect. On the photos here on the right, you can see at the top two pictures a French-style railing on the left and a Georgian-style or English-style railing on the right. We have a Georgian-style cornice here and a French-style cornice. They're very different. The French-style curves up generally, and the Georgian is more Palladian, except for the Louis XVI or 16th period where it becomes the Georgian style or a Palladian style. Here are some paneling differences. The Georgian has a raised beveled panel, and the French swoops up into its curvilinear paneling, and it's curvilinear in section, even if they're straight lines, but sometimes they are very curvy as well. On this slide, I'd like to show you how classicism evolves over time, even within in the French style, for instance. You can see here in 1705, things were extremely Rococo, leading to, in 1723 to the Baroque or the Louis XV period. Here we have, it's in between the Louis XV or very curvy and the Louis XVI, which is straight, and ending up here at the Salon Doré at the Legion of Honor, which is currently being renovated. It's a project that I'm working on right now with the museum, and it's in the classic Louis XVI style, all very straight lines. So you can just see how that evolves over time. The dialect of the language is dependent upon the client preference and the context. So usually the client has a dream, has a desire for a certain type of style that we jump off from to design the house, and I'll explain that further along. Also, the houses that we do they are traditional, but they meet today's programmatic and economic realities, technological realities. These are products of the 21st century. And the other thing here is an exact copy is not the goal. I think it's very important for everyone to understand that classicism is not copying. Many people think that, but it's actually editing from the canon of classical elements. In other words, when you look through the books of history and find the historical precedents that really work for that project or really work for your client or the thing that you really love, you edit that. And that collage of the historical elements is really where all the fun begins. Now I'm going to show you some projects and some of the historical examples of or precedents that inspired those projects. So on the right is a project. It's in Atherton. It's a French chateau or a small chateau, petit chateau. And on the left is the Basilica by Palladio in Vicenza in 1614. Now, you might think, why are you using an Italian precedent for a French house? But it doesn't really matter that it's Italian. It has a beautiful layout of its arch. This is basically now called the Palladian arch or Serliana arch. And that layout is expressed in the project on the right. The entrance door was very much inspired by this page in a book of 19th century details. It's very important to have a good library that you can use to find these great examples. In the book Contemporary Classical, I tried to really show many examples of how we were inspired and what we were inspired by. It was very expensive to do that because we had to buy the rights to the pictures, worldwide rights from photographers as far away as Europe. So it was almost a detective search to get those permissions, and we couldn't even get the permissions of certain things that we really love. So anyway, you can see here the detailing of the doors, the astragal. You can see here how that door manifests itself. And by the way, this door was made in France for us. We had the a good sub bid from France as well as subs here locally. The low bidder wins, and for us, it was very lucky that we were able to get that done. So it's actually made out of French oak. This is an example of the detail of that doorway, the section through the doorway, and different elements that are included in the book, including the profiles of the doors. And this is an example. La Lanterne is in the Versailles area. It's an 18th century house. And that house has been inspired Robert Stern and the Houston architects, Russell Wyndham and Bill Curtis. They also did a house based on this precedent. We didn't base this house on that precedent, but we looked at it for its detailing. This is an in-house watercolor rendering of the front facade of the house. And on the upper left is the floor plan of the house. And on the lower left is a very fascinating project that was built for Prince Christopher of Greece by John Russell Pope. It sits on Fifth Avenue between 96th and 97th Street, unbuilt, but still great to look at. And this is Fifth Avenue. The rooms face the view of Central Park across the street. And this is the porte cochere here probably for a horse and buggy. And the layout of these rooms inspired the stair hall in the middle, inspired the three rooms facing, in this case, the large garden. Another example of details that inspired the rear garden facade. There were many things looked at, and on the left is the actual garden facade, and on the right is a house in the Versailles area, 18th century house. And in terms of the way the half circle emanates from the block of the house, that's the inspiration there. On the left is the L'Ermitage of Madame Pompadour in Fontainebleau, 18th century. Gabriel is the architect, and you can see the curved pediment in the center of that facade and the curved pediment on the right. But the combination of the curved pediment with the curved bay is unique as far as I have ever seen that combination. So that's an example of using the canon of classical architectural elements creatively and uniquely. This is the interior of that half bay, that half circular bay on the right. Interiors by Diane Chapman. And on the left, another John Russell Pope house in Washington from 1922. That was another source of the detailing of that exterior bay. Oh, it's jumping around. These are some other examples of precedents. On the right, the way that this element butts into this volume was an important learning source for me. Rather than having this be, if it were flush, it would be an L-shaped element. But by setting it back, they both read as independent volumes. And that's a very important detail. This is the garden facade in-house rendering. On the left, you can see the peristyle look of this project and how the columns connect these two houses. And on the right, that example going from the garage structure to the main house. These are the floor plans. On the left is currently the Picasso Museum in the Marais, and that's the way that stair comes up, turns around, and opens up to the second level was an inspiration on our floor plan, which starts here in a small space, but as it snails up or spirals up, it becomes larger at the top with a big laylet at the top. This is the stair hall. The floor pattern was designed while the house was designed. This kind of a floor pattern is not easy to do after a house is built. So because of all those diamonds and half diamonds and three-quarter diamonds wanting to be on the money. So this was thought of as the house was laid out. And on the left, a 17th century example of a railing coming down and culminating at those curved steps. Another example, early 18th century example in Paris. You can see the similarities of the wrought iron detailing of the railing on the right and on the left. This is a white bleached oak kitchen, and on the left-hand side, the paneled wall actually opens so that in a party, a buffet could be at the dining room, and it allows for a great circulation. This is another project in Atherton. It's a house, very interesting for an older couple. They were very happy in their house, but in the height of everything, they were given an offer that they couldn't refuse and sold their former house for $45 million, so they had to move. And this is the house they built to replace it. On the right is the site plan, and on the left is the floor plan. You can see that there are round hinge rooms. There are 4 of them, which transition from the orthogonal geometry to the diagonal geometry of the octagonal rooms. This is her study, and the breakfast room. So these were very interesting elements to design. On the left was what the client really was inspired by in our library. They loved that house. You can see the roof line, the dormers are similar. And they also loved the house on the left. And these were, definitely in it. We keep a book of precedents and keep referring back to these things as the houses are designed. In-house watercolor has a black slate roof and a plaster body. And this is the entrance hall on the right, interiors by Stephen Volpe. And on the left, you can see some detailings, Louis XVI detailings. You see the circle in the door jamb. You can see that a similar circle in the top of the arch here in a panel jamb. This is the living room, two views of the living room. On the right is that hinge room that I was referring to earlier that lets you travel from one geometry to another, and it resolves that in a very classical way. And on the left is another original detail of how the wainscoting or the paneling on the lower wall culminates before that wall that goes up a staircase begins. This is her study in the octagonal portion of the house. This is a project that we're building right now in Atherton. It's a large site with, this is the main house. This is the family's garage. There's a tunnel here to a family auto court and a bridge over a recessed garden into the mudroom. It's a theoretical moat. And then the house is on axis with a large lawn and a guest house at the rear. These were some of our inspirations. You can see here we have a pair of towers, a pair of curved towers. You can see that in the Loire Valley, 16th century Renaissance style house. And these were some of the inspirations. This was the inspiration for the rear facade. This was the inspiration for the main staircase. These are a section through the house. And one of the unique features about this house is that the family room in the center of the house has a light well that's carved out of the second floor so that light will flood into a curved ley light here based on the Frick Museum in New York. I don't know why. I'm sorry it keeps jumping like that. This is the ground floor with the ley light, and this is the skylight well on the upper floor. There's a round dining room here, on the second floor, a round children's library, and a round study for the lady of the house. And here you can see that stair that was inspired by the precedent. This is the in-house rendering of the facade of the house, and this house is in the French Renaissance style. This is a project that's almost finished with construction. It'll be finished in May. It's in Las Vegas, and it's a house for a family. It's based on Versailles. Not only, here's the Grand Trianon, and also some McKim, Mead, and White villas in upstate New York. It's done in brick and cast stone. This is a detail of it on the lower right. This is the Loggia del Capitanito in Vicenza, Italy, by Palladio, which was the major inspiration for the typical bay of the house. So there's arched windows and upper windows with balustrades and a balustrade at the roof level. This is a picture of the materials on portions of Versailles, the brick and limestone, which was inspirational, and another McKim, Mead, and White house that we looked at for their beautiful loggias and curved elements. Switching to an apartment in San Francisco, The next two projects were in collaboration with Tucker and Marks. And this is an example of a 17th century Mansard pavilion in Moulins. And we really loved the way the very simple straight lines of the paneling in the Louis XVI period were detailed. And you can see that here on the right. This is a round entrance hall. It has round cabochon in the round stone pattern. And this is an important detail because of the way this is flattened out to receive the artwork, even though the curved crown and curved panel above it helps the room continue to read round. This is the very varied floor paving pattern on the right. You have here a starburst of chevron, parquet de Versailles. Here's the round cabochons. And this is a wonderful way to do a curved staircase, corridor or gallery with a curving chevrons in the white oak flooring. On the left is a folly from the 18th century. It still stands, and it was a fantastic plan with all of these oval pochette spaces, which were inspirational for our curved spaces. This is looking from on the right from the curved gallery through the entrance hall to the living room, and on the left, an example of the chevron or chevron flooring in Paris. This is the Sir John Soane's House Museum in London, and his breakfast room has a central circular motif which brings the light down and has a hanging lantern, and on the left is the dome created in the ceiling of our dining room, and that is real candles. The chandelier comes down by remote control to light the candles, change the candles, clean the candles, and then up again by remote control. This is the bedroom on the left, and a detail of the crown molding on the upper right, and an example of that type of crown molding from the 1730s in France by Blondel. This is the library on the right and the kitchen on the left, both done in French-style paneling. This is a hall in Versailles, a back hall. Basically, paneling there was the sheetrock of its day. But it's beautiful to our eye. It may not have really appealed to Marie Antoinette, but here you can see a chevron pattern going to a tonneau or barrel-shaped bathroom with a central bathtub. And this is a detail of that bathroom on the right. Both are details. One is the vanity, which Suzanne designed with curved, antiqued, back-painted mirror. And on the right, you can see that vanity from a little bit further away, and the bathtub in the center with the French circular paneled motif. This is another project with Suzanne, and it's a house we did for a Greek family in Atherton. Site plan on the left, one of the inspirations on the upper left, in terms of the way that element not only curves away from the front facade, but curves into the front facade. The Villa Carrillos on the left, which is in Beaulieu-sur-Mer on the Côte d'Azur, and I highly recommend that house museum to you. These are some watercolor renderings of that circular entrance element. There it is on the right, and on the left, you have the first century Temple of the Winds in Athens, which inspired the detailing of this pilaster and of the motif going around the entablature, the frieze. The door on the right, again in the Greek style, it looks like two doors, but acts as one. It's very wide. But that hardware actually was made for the Villa Carrillos. It's still made by Bricard in Paris. We were able to buy it from them. The medallions and the knockers and the doorknobs. And on the left, you can see the Erechtheum in Athens, and what we were inspired by was the way that the brackets hold the entablature above the doorway, which is right there. On the right is the entrance hall, and on the left is a Dutch design from 1784. It's in a house owned by Dick Jenrette right now in the Caribbean. And I love that house for its indoor-outdoor feel and its exuberance of architectural detailing on the interior. This is the living room. Beautiful furnishings and draperies by Suzanne. And the walnut-paneled library on the right, and the Villa Carrillos has a similar beamed and coffered ceiling on the left. These are some details of how we do the air conditioning and heating. They're coming out of the curve of the arch here. And these are Ionic pilasters based on 2nd century details from Rome. Lots of special detailings with blocks meeting bull-nosed verticals and horizontals for the bookcases. On the left, we have a Weston Park in England by James Payn in 1760. We find that conservatories, which this is one of on the left, are wonderful examples of how to open up classicism and add a lot of glass. It's very hard to find these precedents. But and we use that here on the master bedroom wing of the house, and it's a series of arches with pilasters between, and that's based on early orangeries, or where they would grow their orange trees in the winter. This is another great example on the upper right. It's a French example. You can see all that glass with double pilasters in between. And these are renderings of that house. This is the example of arch, arch, arch with pilasters in between. And that idea is used in many places on this project. This house is mostly stone with some plaster infill and an antique clay tile roof. This is the cut stone on the right, and another example of an orangery at Kenwood in London by Robert Adam. This is the finial at the top. It's called a Greek finial is called an acroterion. And on the left, you can see the drawing, the measured drawing from the Temple of Zeus, 330 BC. These drawings that architects did and went there and measured are the invaluable source to get these projects to look good. If you can't make that up, you have to find it in your history books, in your sources. This is the backyard with the swimming pool. And these are some of the interiors. On the left, the mosaic floor at the Villa Carrillos. On the right, the mosaic floor by Suzanne. This is the master bath on the left, the Villa Carrillos, with its exuberant use of marble, mosaics. You can see how the floor of the bathroom on the right was inspired by the floor of the bathtub on the left. The master bedroom on the left. In this house, because it's a one-story house has 15-foot ceilings throughout most of the rooms. We're very lucky to do that. We love one-story houses for that reason. And on the right is an outdoor pergola. The urn was based on an urn in Piranesi's book, and it's actually it's not hollow, it's solid on top. It's used as a decorative element above the keystone. And that might be considered slang. I'm going to discuss that at the end, but the idea of using classical elements in unusual ways is what I'm referring to as slang. Something not in the orders, not from history, something where you take an element and use it in an unexpected way. This is a project in the Napa Valley. In the tower, there is the water tank, and above the water, for the vineyard, and above the water tank is the major domo's office for the vineyard, and on the left, the precedent from Normandy. You can see the wood and plaster construction, the thatch roof. It belongs to the same family of thought, and that is an example of a Normandy dialect in the French language of classicism. On the upper left, my favorite potager garden with the loggia or barn element that had wonderful brackets, and those brackets were used on that pergola there and add a lot of charm, even though they're not necessarily structural. This is a project in the Carmel Valley. It sits on 1,000 acres. It's so remote and so off the grid that it generates its own electricity, has a well for water, and has a thermo, I'm not sure of the exact name, but it also generates energy from under the earth. It's done in It's inspired by the drawing on the upper left. That is a plantation in the South. These clients came to us. They were in a tour of plantations by the ICA in the South, and they just loved this plantation so much that they wanted to build it in Carmel. So they asked someone on the tour who was a woodworker, who should we use in the Bay Area? And he recommended me. And that's the value of the ICA. It's just a great networking organization. You get to meet people from all over the country that come through here or when we travel there. This is its house, the house sitting in the site in Carmel, and a rendering of one side of the house above. The house is a butterfly in plan. The skylight of the entrance hall on the left, the rendering of the entrance hall on the right. Okay. This is another project that we're doing with Tucker and Marks. This is this was a project that we did with Suzanne and Cole. This is the villa, the new villa on, I believe, 13.5 acres in Hillsborough. 3 sites were assembled. This is the guest house, auto court. The entrance is down here. That's the gate. So you drive up over a bridge and arrive at the auto court here. You look out through the house at the pool, stepped fountains going down to a large reflecting pond. I think it's 150 feet long with a pavilion at the end. That reflecting pond the detailing of it was inspired by David Hicks' project in Johannesburg, South Africa. And the stepping at the pool, at the reflecting pond, was based on Addison Meisner's steps at the Casa Bienvenida in Santa Barbara. On the left is one of the inspirations, which was a George Washington Smith house in Holmby Hills. George Washington Smith was the preeminent Spanish colonial architect in California. If we have a regional architecture, Spanish colonial is it. There are many wonderful regionalists. I myself prefer to work in many styles. I don't just focus on one type of architecture, but it's wonderful to do that as well. On the right is an example from Spain of a wall at a house or a building that sets up the perimeter of a courtyard. Here is a rendering of our version of setting up the entrance court, and here it is built, very freshly built. There still hasn't really been pulled together yet, but this is the project, the first part of the project to be completed. These are Spanish details on the left. The window has a beautiful shape that inspired some windows on the drawing on the right. This is wrought iron Spanish detailing for a typical French door upstairs. And on the left, a pavilion loggia attached to the, at the side of the structure. These were some examples of some of our inspiration. On the left by George Washington Smith, which is a bit more classical than the normal Spanish colonial, which rambles. On the right, these are some grills that inspired the grills flanking the front door. The Spanish young ladies would sit behind those grills and watch what happened on the street because they were not allowed to be seen. The grills that inspired these elements here. And that's one of the railings I just showed. And that's the loggia that you just saw. This is the rear facade. This is the pool level and the stepped fountains and the level of the reflecting pond. This is a 2-story loggia element here with groin vaults. This is a construction shot of that project. These are some preliminary interiors by Tucker and Marks. This is the main stair hall. This was a railing by Charles Platt, in a book by Charles Platt. And I felt it had a Mediterranean feel about it, so we took that design and expanded it to cover the whole spiral staircase. Now this is some architecture by Michelangelo. This is the Laurentian Library in Florence. When I do go to the American Academy, my proposal was to study the architecture of Michelangelo because I find it so creative in its slang. You can see here he's using scroll brackets to hold up columns, these wonderful classical decorative elements. Look at how beautiful those corner scroll brackets come together. You just don't see this very often. So I just want to absorb some of his eccentric or slang-like elements. This is an example at the Porta Pia. No, this is at the Castel Sant'Angelo in Rome. You can see the central keystone again. Everything seems out of scale. You have the small niches, the big openings, a central structural support, which is usually a no-no in classical architecture, but somehow the whole composition holds together. And this is the Porta Pia. Look at how crazy this looks. I mean, that is not one of the orders. That is really stepping out there. So this is what I'll be taking a good look at. And hopefully I'll come back with a lecture about that afterwards. Thank you very much. I want to just end with stating that classicism is a living language, and I hope everyone here tries to speak it fluently. Thank you so much.